Welcome to the Sum of All Wisdom, conversations on music, makers, and meaning. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Catey. That piece we just heard was Alexander Scriabin's Sonata Opus 30, number 4, performed by Daria Vasileva, my guest on the show today. In our conversation, Daria and I talk about Scriabin and a number of other composers and performers, and I'm really excited to get to it. But let me give you just a little background. So I met Daria earlier this year at her performance at the Union Square Soiree in Baltimore, Maryland. And today we welcome Daria, an internationally performing concert artist whose playing combines virtuosity, intellectual depth, and a powerful sense of musical storytelling. Originally from Kazan, Russia, Daria began studying piano at a young age and quickly distinguished herself as a musician of exceptional sensitivity and technique. Her musical path eventually led her to Switzerland, where she continued advanced studies and began building a vibrant international career as a recitalist and chamber musician. Daria has received recognition in several international competitions, including distinctions connected with the music of Scriabin. He's a composer whose visionary compositional language and mysticism have really become central to her artistic voice. Her performances are known for exploring the expressive and philosophical dimensions of the piano repertoire, particularly the late Romantic and early Modernist tradition. Alongside her performing career, Daria is also deeply committed to expanding the classical canon. She created the Feminine Power Project, a concert initiative dedicated to bringing greater attention to works by women composers, past and present, whose music deserves far greater visibility on the concert stage. She's also an active educator and communicator, sharing insights into repertoire and technique and musical interpretation with a large and growing international audience and body of students. And in today's conversation, we'll talk about her artistic journey, the influence of Scriabin, the creative process behind feminine power, and what it means to build a musical voice in the 21st century. So Daria, welcome very much, and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's such a kind introduction. I even feel a bit shy now to talk about anything. Thank you so much for your kindness, Scott. I'm so excited to be here.
I first became aware of you through your post on LinkedIn, which doesn't seem like an obvious place to learn about a musician and her performances, but that's where you were posting on your U.S. debut in New York and in Baltimore at the Union Square Soiree in Baltimore. That was earlier this year in January, and I was really fortunate to attend the Baltimore performance. And I got to tell you, for real, Daria, I think it changed me. It was one of those moments when a piece of music and a performance sort of really come together and transform a person, right? And specifically, it was Scriabin's Sonata 9, The Black Mass. I've appreciated that piece since I first heard it. I think the original thing I heard was Ashkenazi, right? The classic performance of it. But your playing, I think, took it to a whole new level. And I've been obsessed, if I can be honest, with it since then and expanding sort of my understanding of his repertoire. But what I'd love to start with, we'll come back to Scriabin, but what I'd really love to start with, if you don't mind, is maybe a similar experience in your life, a moment when music sort of revealed something unexpected or transformed you and your musical thinking changed. Maybe it's performance or rehearsing or listening to a piece of music or a performance. Can you tell us about a moment when music really spoke to you and took you in a new creative direction?
I think, to be honest, for me, it could be a bit challenging to answer this particular question because I feel that my music journey has always been a flow, not that I would necessarily feel that there was any particular step that took me to another level, but more like a flow which was taking me into different directions, but it was always difficult for me to distinguish any particular moments. But of course, probably I could name my first experience actually listening to Tchaikovsky's symphonies live, and it deeply transformed me as well as a teenager. I believe it was one of the moments that made me appreciate my musical path because, to be honest, as a kid, I was extremely lazy. I didn't want to practice at all. And, I was just sliding through my specialized music school journey. It's very interesting phenomena in post-Soviet countries. We have these specialized music schools with a really deep learning process, and Sometimes even in Russia, they compare it to military schools because they're very strict, they're very effective, sometimes a bit toxic, but still extremely effective. So I was sliding through this journey just thanks to my decent memory, some music talent, but I was so lazy and I wasn't really motivated until I think I was 13 or 14 years old, and I experienced the power of Tchaikovsky, and I do believe that it transformed me and it switched something off in me and switched something on, and made me appreciate what I do actually, and made me want to strive to become better, to become something meaningful and not just young pianist who just presses the keys and just flows from one exam to another one. I believe that was one significant step in my journey. When for sure I would say that my move to Switzerland and expanding my knowledge in terms of music and also just in terms of artistic career is what transformed me deeply as well, because the mentality of Western culture was so different to what I experienced in post-Soviet countries, where we are taught to be, again, extremely effective. We are taught to own our skills, to hone our interpretations, to bring all these details to extremely high level, but at the same time, we are not taught to express our individuality or to explore our artistry. And in Switzerland, I got so much more freedom to do this, and I believe it deeply changed me as an artist as well. And it made me, at least it helped me become who I am today, and hopefully who I will become in the future. And that was definitely a deep change for me. So I guess this experience in Switzerland also helped me open my eyes, broaden my horizons in terms of repertoire. Because again, in post-Soviet countries, we are usually studying so-called competition repertoire. With Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, of course, Schumann, Scriabin as well. But we are not so much into exploring something different, something besides this competition repertoire. And in Switzerland, it was a place where I explored music of female composers as well, or music of composers who are not so known. And it's actually the place where I also became so much into Scriabin. Because again, I believe his music, to understand and to really feel his music without a certain degree of freedom is just impossible. And since it was so much stricter for me in Russia, I believe it was simply impossible to really connect to his music. So yeah, I guess that's in a nutshell what I could tell you about this.
That's a good answer. That's a very comprehensive answer. I really like especially the observation of the cultural difference between your training in Russia and your experience in Switzerland. I think that's really interesting.
I hope so.
On your Instagram account, you call yourself an ambassador of Scriabin.
At least I'd like to think of myself, in this way, but maybe sometimes it's also about fake it till make it. But at the same time, so many people reached out to me and told me that I helped them explore Scriabin's music, or just that I revealed Scriabin's music to them, because a lot of times so many people, both online and offline, they shared with me that Scriabin's music was difficult for them to understand and to connect to before. And I helped them in some degree to feel it in a bit more spontaneous way, in a bit more expressive way. And of course, for me, it's always the best compliment. And it's why I guess I like to call myself ambassador of Scriabin's music, and hopefully I would be able to do more for his music later in my life as well.
I think it's an important ambassadorship, right? The moving into the modernist period, into the 20th century. I think atonality challenges a lot of people, and
Yeah.
his transition from sort of Chopin influence into a much different kind of compositional language, right? I think that takes a lot for someone to sort of get their head around at times. So if you
Yeah,
can bring that to
absolutely.
people, that tradition, the modernist tradition, everything after 1910 or so, is
Hmm.
really wonderful music leading into even today, right? And so much of the how it's just been like a flower exploding into all kinds of new ways of writing and thinking and listening to music that's contemporary. So I think it's important. I love that you do that.
Thank you.
What is it that his music does for you?
uh, it's very comprehensive. It's I believe there are so many colors, and what you said about blooming above a potentially flower, I believe that his music makes my soul bloom.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I believe that in his music, no matter if it's tonal music or atonal music, no matter if it's early or later stages of his musical development, his music is always full of this particular feeling of freedom, of trying to break free, of achieving this universal freedom, this ecstatic freedom. In a way, I feel so much unitement in his music and his art
Mhm.
that it definitely makes my soul and my mind as well thrive and just bloom and want to explore more, and it inspires me as well to try to live my life in fullest, because his music is just so full of this willpower. But and so I would even call it optimism in the highest possible way, because
Mhm.
again his music is just so full of this will of power. Again, doesn't matter the period of his development and what it, and I just cannot fully describe what it does for me. It's why I
Really,
play it, because it's very difficult for me to talk about it.
when you play a piece and you play it multiple times, does it is it something new each time? Do you feel is it a transfiguration for you? Is it something new revealed each time you play it? How do you live that music when you're playing?
For me as an artist, the connection to audience is maybe one of the most important things for me. So it definitely transforms me every single time I perform it. I would say it's impossible, and it should not even be a goal, to feel his transformative power every time when you practice, for example.
Mm.
I believe a lot of young artists or young students sometimes they question, their motivation if they do not feel inspired every single time we practice, and I believe
Mm.
it's also important thing to talk about. I definitely do not feel inspired or transforming myself every single time I just play his music, but every single time I try to open it up to my audience, either online or, of course, especially in my performances, and it definitely transforms me, and I definitely hope that it transforms my audience as well, more or less.
Talk a little bit about classical audiences. So there's been some talk lately about classical music is not, it's dying out kind of thing. It's not a new conversation, but it's coming from some new sources, I think, lately. But I'm interested to know your experience of the audience, right? How are they responding to classical music? Is the audience changing? Are there more young people? How do you bring in young people? What's diversity look like? How is the classical world, sort of generally speaking, how is that world responding to music now?
I think, in a way, I created a bubble for myself through my social media. I Since I'm having blog on Instagram or in YouTube, I do attract more younger audience than
Mm.
a lot of other classical musicians. So, for example, when I attend other classical concerts, I tend to see more uh, older audiences, which is fine, and I love them. I love every single member of my audience or audience who would like to cherish classical music in someone else's performances. I believe it's just such a precious thing. But for myself, yeah, I do see that I have this kind of precious bubble that consists sometimes from slightly younger audience. For example, some of my last recitals in different countries, they definitely included at least, 75% of audience that I would say they were younger than 30. And for me, it was a very precious thing to see because, as you said, lately there are so many conversations, so many disputes regarding that classical audience is aging in a way. And I am happy that I'm able to bring more of the younger audiences to the concert, and I believe that it's the power of social media as well. And I believe that if more of classical artists were to use that power to harness it and without prejudices, that, for example, when classical musicians go to social media, they diminish their art or they diminish classical composers. I believe that's not true at all. And I believe that it's such a powerful tool to attract more audiences to the art, but of course in the age of deficit span of attention, etc., etc. It might be difficult otherwise to attract them. I guess that's my answer.
When you a couple of things besides just the music and the performance at the Union Square soiree. One of the things that really struck me is it looked to me like you were playing it all from memory, which is, I think, amazing. Can you tell us about the relationship between memory and interpretation and being in the moment of playing for an audience?
In our post-Soviet environment, which built me as a musician, which formed me as a musician, it gave me all my base. For me personally, it's the scores definitely distract me. If I have to follow them, even if they're there just for me to be sure, to feel safer, I guess safer is the answer. I don't want to feel safe. I want to feel risky sometimes. I want to feel so fully into music that, when you know that you don't have a choice, it feels different, at least to me. You have no choice. You just have to live to immerse yourself so much into the music that you cannot just get lost. I believe that, at least for me, if you have scores, you feel safer, but you also feel less on the edge. And for me, it would be worse for the music, because if I have scores and I know that I can just look at them, it removes a part of the thrill for me, which is so essential, at least to my performances. So sometimes people ask me if I sing, during my performances, because sometimes I do immerse myself so much that I just speak the notes of a singular melody that is so important for me at the moment. But it's so vital for me just to be there that I can sing or I can pronounce the notes sometimes, and it also helps me create this fully immersive experience, which I also try to create for my listeners as well. But at the same time, I believe that playing with scores is absolutely fine, and I believe that it's so important to understand also for young artists, young students, that we all have different types of artistry. And it's very important just to try to do your best to figure out your own and not to orient yourself to what other artists do.
When you put together a performance, what's your process for deciding which pieces to include, and do you try to create an arc, something that the listeners can sort of grow with through the performance and leave with afterwards?
Absolutely. For me, the dramaturgy is crucial when thinking about the concert program. It's why I stopped doing forming my concert programs in a chronological order. It's also what happened at Baltimore Soiree. For me, it's much more about the inner story, about the inner logic. And again, for example, I played ninth Scriabin Sonata, and after I played his Opus 1, so his first ever published piece, which would be impossible in more traditional concert settings because people expect you to play Bach, then something classical, and then you move to romantic, and then you move to modern music. But for me, it's much more about, first of all, the story and then emotions. For example, for me, it would be impossible to finalize the concert with Scriabin's Ninth Sonata because while it's deeply transformative work, I believe it also drains you. And if you just finish the concert with this work just because it was the most modern piece at the concert, you risk your listeners feel disturbed, or of course it depends also on the audience, maybe not all listeners would be so prepared as you to absorb this music. Some would just be left confused and not understanding, and especially if it was their first classical concert, would we really like to come back after finishing with ninth Sonata by Scriabin? I'm not so sure, so it's why, for example, I would put it into the middle of a program. So after that, I have a journey to come back to light. And for me, it's also one of the most crucial questions I ask myself is how I'd like my listeners leave the concert. What should they have in their souls, in their heart, after they leave a concert hall, or if it's a house concert. Especially I believe it's a house concert because it creates even more intimate and more expressive atmosphere. So for me it's very important to always try to finalize my concerts on an uplifting note, which again is quite easy when you program your programs, when your programs consist mostly of Scriabin's music, because again, as I mentioned before, his music is so full of will of power and this cosmic universal optimism. So it's quite easy to find work that would fit my purpose, which is to release my listeners from this journey with an uplifting mood and a heart full of happiness, joy, or at least a hope that you would experience this happiness or joy later in your life.
Who are the other composers that are key to you in your repertoire right now, the late Romantic and early Modernist period? Who is it that you, aside from Scriabin, who do you get inspired by mostly?
While I, of course, focus myself, my artistic journey on music of Alexander Scriabin, I always try to explore music of different composers and also less known. That was also one of the reasons why I decided to create a Feminine Power project, to explore the voices of female composers in all of their diversity, all of their different cultures, and just to hear their voices speaking about their experiences, their hardships, and of course the cultures of where they're coming from. Recently, I included in several of my concert programs works by a Soviet repressed composer Varvara Gaigerova, and it's quite an interesting story of how I became captivated by her music. Even though I'm a Russian pianist and I've been living in Russia for 23 years of my life, and I finished my professional studies there with my specialist degree. I never heard about Varvara, when I studied there. And again, I believe that's the problem of being so focused on competition repertoire and having this rather narrow perspective on musical repertoire. But when I moved to Switzerland and I played several concerts with this Feminine Power Project program, one of the Swiss musicologists, he attended one of my concerts and he brought me some scores of Maria Szymanowska, for example, which I haven't yet played. And he asked me if I've heard about Varvara Geigerova. And we talked about her. He told me a little bit about her life, and I cannot express how ashamed I was because he was Swiss, I was Russian. He heard about her, and I have not. And it again showed me this gap, in approach to music. And I learned four of her skizzen. It's a German word, four of her sketches. And I performed some of them at my recitals recently. And actually, she studied with Meskovsky. Meskovsky was later contemporary of Scriabin as well. So she was born, I believe, in 1903 and passed away in 1944. So again, it was very short life. And she hasn't left so much music for us, but I believe that everything she composed, it's incredible, and it's why I also try to push her music now for social media a little bit more, and not just for her own sake, but to potentially inspire both musicians and the audiences to try to explore this music that for some circumstances is forgotten now. And again, it's not for artistic circumstances, but just for historic and living circumstances. But her music was never explored even in her own country. So I believe that this story hopefully might also inspire some other musicians to discover more of music that could have been forgotten, but at the same time presents so many artistic challenges and so much joy to both performer and audiences.
Will you commission or premiere new works as a part of the Feminine Power Project?
Yes, I performed a work of a young Ukrainian composer in Switzerland. It's called Night in Ukraine. So she composed this piece specifically for my concerts, and it was a huge success. And it was definitely a transforming experience for me as well. I believe it was my only case so far, but hopefully in the future it will be more.
Indeed, absolutely. You're also a composer in your own right. You've composed preludes and etudes, I think I saw on your website.
Yes, I treat it a little bit more as a hobby. And it did help me explore a style of Scriabin as well. Because these little compositions, they are written and composed in style of early Scriabin. It was one of the ways for me to explore his music even more. And I just treat them as experiments. You never know, of course, what might happen in the future, but for now, it's definitely a hobby inside my profession.
Is it a hobby you enjoy? Do you like writing music?
Yes. It's usually a kind of artistic escape for me after especially stressful or demanding artistic performing projects. So when I need some time to disconnect, I do it through this type of activity. So it definitely helps me to regain my inspiration and my energy and come back and to performing projects.
When you write music, where does the music come from? Are you hearing it? Do you have a theme or a melody that you want to write to? Is it outside external sounds that you're hearing? How do you bring it together?
Yeah, I guess it's definitely something external what might just come to me. But as I'm a pianist and so many composers used to compose in exactly the same way, I believe, I take this little theme that might have come to me to piano, and I start playing around with it. And when I explore it and I create something together with my piano. So it doesn't come to me as a visual image or some particular philosophical idea maybe. It comes just an abstract music which I later explore on my piano.
Mm. What kind of piano do you play?
So just to understand, is it like brand or what exactly do you mean?
I guess I'm thinking I grew up in a house with an old upright that didn't
Uh-huh.
sound very good, but it was fun to tinker on. But I'm wondering when you are in your rehearsal space or at home practicing, whatever that looks like, what is it, a grand? Is it a baby grand? Is it a
Since I'm living in apartment building, I have a pretty interesting instrument. It's an acoustic kawaii, yet with built-in silent system. So it's a hybrid piano in a way. So it allows me practice in my headphones, and in my headphones I hear a concert kawaii piano sound, which is pretty incredible. And the acoustic mode is totally fine for me as a professional as well. So it's the best kind of instrument an artist can have in a limited space. Also when you have limitations from neighbors. But yeah, I'm quite happy with it. And I used to rent the same instrument in Switzerland because I also lived in an apartment building, and it was a revelation for me because in Russia such instruments were not common at all. So yeah, but hopefully one day I would be able to bring my baby grand from Russia, which is an old renovated German instrument, and it has a very special character as well. But for this, I would need to improve my living conditions to something a bit bigger.
and without neighbors, at least not very close neighbors.
Exactly.
Do you miss your piano?
Yes, of course. It has taught me so much, and there are so many memories connected to it. So, yeah. But every piano I've ever played brings me special memories, and I treat every piano I've ever played, or especially, of course, when I perform, I treat it as a friend or sometimes even as a lover, but we have to bond this special connection, this special bond, for the evening when we have to be like one for our audiences to enjoy the most of what we can offer. So it's always a very special process for me to get to know a new instrument and to become friends or again lovers with it. Just even if it's just for one evening.
Your Kauai and the piano back in Russia, do you name them? Is
No,
it that kind of
actually
intimate
no.
thing?
No, but I guess it's also because my artistic personality as well, it's rather abstract. So I try to be a better storyteller in a way, and I try to do my best when programming my concerts, for example. But overall, in my life, I cannot relate myself to Schumann, for example, with his extensive literature experience, or even to Scriabin, who has left several programs for his works, several poems as well. For example, his fifth sonata has a little epigraph, but he wrote as a poem. I believe it was an initial program for his poem of Ecstatic. Sorry, sometimes, when I translate the names of works, I am confused if I still pronounce it more in a Russian way, or French, or German, or English. So sorry for potential mix-up. Yeah, so I did not name my pianos or anything else in, in my artistic work.
Schumann feels so very uniquely, I think, individualistic and subjective to me. It's.
Absolutely.
I think you either really get him or it's just not a thing.
Yeah, but the same with Scriabin or Wagner, I believe. Yes, absolutely.
How do you, so the storytelling that you mentioned, I think you are a really good storyteller, musical storyteller,
You're
and
very kind.
oral storyteller. I mean, you're telling very good stories. How do you, in the musical sense, how do you approach balancing technical precision and emotional expression?
I believe my technical precision is actually one of my weaker sides, which of course I always strive to improve. But also because I'm not a virtuosic pianist by nature, and it took me quite some time to develop a technique that I possess now. Still, it's it's lacking quite a bit, and of course, while I try my best to improve it, my balance is the emotional or the logical or the philosophical concept of my playing is much more important to me. And if there is something missing in technique, but I hear this in this particular speed or with this particular intensity, I would always sacrifice technical aspect. I'm not sure if it's right or wrong. Again, I believe there is no black and white in artistic expression, but it's what it is for me.
Your instructors in Russia at the Kazan Conservatoire, right? I think this
Yes.
is where you got your education. What would they say about sacrificing the technical for the expressive?
I believe in the world, Russian musical school, Russian piano school is considered to be one of the most profound, one of the most emotional as well as schools of music, of playing. And one of the founders, in a way, of Russian music piano school, Anton Rubinstein, about his concerts, people would say that sometimes half of the notes he was playing were under the piano. They were basically so much not there, but his artistic presence, he was called a lion at piano. This particular tendency, I believe, had a strong influence on Russian school overall. So, in a way, my principles, they still, were very adequate to what you call Russian piano school.
Can you tell us what the future looks like for you? What are your next steps in your career? What are you most looking forward to in the coming years?
My biggest milestone this year, I believe, is release of my debut album. Of course, it's dedicated to Alexander Scriabin. We are releasing it with French label Aparté, and it's gonna come out on 5th of June. And it's called Elements, and it's dedicated to 4 elements of nature. It's an interesting angle to take on Scriabin's music, but I did so because of my tribute to Switzerland, where I discovered myself as a Scriabin's lover, and Switzerland is so much about nature and its beauty and appreciation of it, and for me, in my mind, it was so natural to connect Scriabin to nature in this particular way, also because the recording was possible for me due to help of Swiss Foundation, who sponsored me, who sponsored my recording. So it's gonna come out very soon, and already in April the 4 singles are gonna be available. I believe Fire and Water, and then I would have in May release of Air and Earth. So I'm very excited about that, and of course later I will have concerts also dedicated to promotion of the album, and of course to spreading more light, more air, hopefully, and more fire. For someone maybe more earth, this grounding feeling. in such unstable times. And of course, more water, more flexibility, more flow, more artistic flow, intuition. So yeah, I would say that's the main thing for me at the moment.
I can't wait to hear that record when it's out. I think that's
Thank
very
you.
exciting. And good luck. I really hope you're successful with that.
Thank you.
We're close to the an hour now, so I want to wrap up with a couple of questions that are focused on listeners. If you could give advice to someone who wants to maybe devote their life to music or to being creative, what advice would you give, for instance, to a young pianist who's just beginning to think about a professional path?
I believe it's the most important and not the most obvious thing is, while you obviously have to do your own in a traditional way of practice, honing your skills, understanding music history, music theory, all of these music concepts, it's very important that you start to look out for things that distinguish your individuality as early as possible, and that you try to build your artistic identity and your projects around this individuality as early as possible. I learned it quite late in my artistic path, in my educational path, and I believe for so long I was in the dark about that, and I believe it's in a way I could have done more as an artist if I discovered it earlier in my path. And it's why it's probably my main advice. Just to listen to yourself while, again, of course, honing and perfecting your skills. It's so crucial to understand where you stand as an artist. And of course, it's also crucial to understand that it's not going to define you until you're 19 years old or something. Of course, it can change. Of course, it can be flexible. But still, it's so vital to try to find the ground you're going to stand at as an artist.
When you found that, when did you find that? Was that in Switzerland? Was it in?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I don't know, probably a few years after I moved, I just realized that it was a problem when I was applying to scholarship from Swiss government for talented foreign artists. Just because without it I wouldn't be able to study there, because obviously it's a very expensive country. Even though we actually have very affordable education, still just to live there, it wouldn't have been possible or accessible to me. So I won this scholarship, but before, when I was applying and I was working on my motivation later, which was before AI took over all this type of documentation and made it much easier, I realized that all my achievements, all my concert projects, they were so disorganized in an artistic way. I had a lot of achievements. I had some competitions won. I had a lot of concerts, big concerts, but all of them were just so different. And repertoire-wise and also ideas-wise, I just realized that I couldn't see myself as an artist there. It was also different. And I was, I believe, 22 or 23 when I just realized what is the problem. And maybe when I was around 25 years old, I finally started feeling my artistic identity a bit more. And of course, now I would say it's a big difference. Also, when you play, it's quite different when you understand yourself as an artist a bit more, and you understand your roots, as well, and you understand your aspirations. It affects your playing as well.
Something magical about discovering that about yourself.
Yeah.
One final question, Daria. I'm not sure this is different from the advice you gave, but I want to know if you have a piece of wisdom for folks who are listening to the podcast. What's the one thing you'd like them to take away about music or creativity or life or artistry?
I I guess it's already difficult to provide a second piece of wisdom. I'm not even sure my first piece of wisdom was wise enough. But maybe the second one could be a bit more general. I believe that it's just so crucial to think about people you interact with and how you'd like them to feel after interaction with you. It doesn't matter if it's your listeners, if it's your students or your teacher or your loved ones or just people in government office or in supermarket. I believe it's something we are not very conscious about sometimes, but I believe that the world could have been a much kinder and better place if we were more conscious about our interactions with others. Just ask yourself, for example, I try to ask myself about it before having a lesson with my student. Not only what I want to teach them tonight or today, but also how I want them to feel after my lesson. Would I like them to feel more confident and more grounded or more inspired? Or would I really like them to feel more stressed or more anxious or more or less confident? And this question really helps me to build my interactions with them in a more meaningful way.
Beautiful. Very intentional way of interacting with other people. That's lovely.
I hope.
Thanks so much for being on the show today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much. It was so fruitful, I believe, even for me just to talk about it, and so inspiring. And you're such a kind person, and your questions were so deep and meaningful, and I thank you for this. It was so beautiful.
I'm so happy that you joined us.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right, Daria, I'll be in touch. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, and have a best week. And thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Skitsin, or Sketches, by Varvara Gagereva, performed by Daria Vasileva. Gagereva was a repressed Soviet composer, and Daria has so thoughtfully brought her music to us today and given us such a profound performance. You can find links to Daria's recorded music in the show notes, and if you're able, I strongly recommend seeing her in a live performance. You will be immensely glad you did. Thank you for listening to The Sum of All Wisdom. If this conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others. The Sum of All Wisdom is written, produced, and hosted by me, Dr. Scott Catey. released by Ravenna Studios and distributed by Transistor FM. Thanks.